you feel like your vision is sufficiently realized, or you want help from me and or others to
We can work together. I'm trying to
move
figure
it
it out.
around? Let me see if I was getting you right. You were thinking of, yes, a circle in the middle, but not everybody necessarily being in that circle, right?
Right.
Right. So there's still a circle. Let me put it. Circle of how many people are you thinking in the middle?
Um, 5, 6.
Okay, let's go with those 5. Cool. And then the others around, just generically around.
Well, they can be linked.
Cool. So maybe it can be a little bit of both, right? Like one slightly bigger circle in the middle
Mm-hmm.
with slightly smaller circles on the edges. What would be some benefits or the opposite of benefits um, to that configuration?
Well, I think the benefits would be to to talk a little bit about Farzana's point about like the communication gets hazy when there's different circles. Then at least there will be a linkage between that and create like a point person slash liaison slash somebody that's reporting back and linking those circles. But then at the same time, there's still that like not everybody's all the way included, and um yeah.
Cool. Julissa, is there a chance that on your screen sharing you could not be on presentation mode so that we can see how the faces are moving?
Oh, yes. Hold on a second.
Yep. But what I'm hearing is with the faces configured this way, where there is a centerpiece in the middle, a group, and it has the smaller groups on the outside, it allows for a little bit of the best of the previous options, right? Of it can still be decentralized so that groups can be small enough where they can still see each other's faces and hear each other's voices. But there's also a little bit of decentralization, but they're not completely disconnected. They're connected to the middle. And this is the point where the activity no longer holds in a virtual setting where we move the things because our bodies are not there. But if we were in person, the people right in the middle circle, which is similar to a general circle, we could play with which way they're facing, right? If they're just facing inwards to the circle in the middle, they're giving that to the people in the other circle, vice versa. Always one way and the other can always be looking the other. And both of them can be turning around um, whenever they need to speak to either of the sides. And it's somewhat of a silly game. We're done playing it. I acknowledge it's silly. I acknowledge it totally loses the point where we can't do it, in person, moving our bodies, which is the point. But part of me is just reluctant to let it go. And it tries to convey a very, very, very simple concept, which is, Julius, if you could go to the next slide, which is how do we integrate, actually the next slide right after that one, if we last time established, that there's these two main energies in any group process, which is the moving forward energy and the moving circularly energy, the moving forward being the getting things done one, the circular one, the hearing everybody's voices and tending to needs. This is how do we try to attempt both when we're a group so big that we can no longer sit in one room all together for every single meeting. Julissa, would you click next, please? And then next again. And sorry, I do that for every single bullet point. And it is how do we integrate those two forces in circle structures? Oh, one too much. The two forces in circle structures, they become autonomy and interdependence, because groups have the autonomy to decide on their own, but they also they decide autonomously, but they decide in the service of the whole organization. So they need to have that broader perspective, and that's why we have the double link for decentralized coordination. We'll get more in detail now, but for this particular session, I invited folks to come with a drawing, specifically with an organogram, to come with a drawing of YPC and how YPC makes decisions. And it's totally okay if you didn't bring one. I'd just like to see a show of hands or in the chat or however who did bring one, so that I know whether we should take some time to draw a quick one here or whether we can see ones that you drew. So did anyone bring one? Cool. Seeing none, I'm gonna invite us to, oh, Deborah, I see a thumb. Is that that's a consent? Or you did bring one?
I did. It's a little different from the circle structure.
Cool. Awesome. In that case, I'm gonna invite us to take like between 2 and 5 minutes, less than 5, but like closer to 2 minutes, to sketch something up real quick. I have a piece of paper right here, if digital works for you better. But they tried to do what we call an organigram, which means a visual representation organization, in this case of YPC. And let's compare notes. Let's see how you would draw it.
For people who are guests here and not in YPC yet, what should they do?
I invite you to draw an organogram of an organization that you participate in, and specifically one that you see most related to YPC. So if there's, if a partner organization or something similar like that, or just any organization that you spend most time playing. So I'm going to take my video to do that. Oh, Mike, I see you joined. Do you want to tell us how you're doing?
How am I? I'm happy to be in community.
Awesome. I'm putting a link to the slideshow there in the chat. We've only done the first couple of slides. We only really did an overview of what we talked about last time and the general topic, which is circle structures. And I was just inviting us to do a drawing of YPC's structure, do an organogram. So let's draw for a couple of minutes and then check in with each other. Do folks want and/or need more time? Yeah, drawing's not my forte, so I might be taking a shortcut to not put myself in a position where I have to do too much. Anybody need and/or want more time before we do a little show and tell? Okay, then let's show and tell. Michael, you want to go first?
I should have drawn a screen. If you all see, maybe spotlight, but so here is circles that are autonomous in this bidirectional lineup, and the idea is that the top circles come together into like coordinating circle, for lack of a better word, and then the coordinating circle has different to be kind of coordinate, right? Which is what in I think, yeah. Anyway, I'll stop for the sake of time. That's how I kind of have right now. Overlapping or intersection. That's the thing. People see.
I can see the general of it. Nice. Cool. Any Julisa, you have one?
Can you hear me?
Ooh. I can hear now.
Amazing. So I don't have a physical or electronic drawing, but I have a verbal drawing for y'all. So like different colored circles that are connected in a Venn diagram form. So it's like a big circle in the middle and smaller ones around. And yeah, so I would go even deeper and say like the colors like mean things, and like the different color mixes, create like a whole rainbow. So if you can envision that.
Yourself, was that intentional? Were you Julisa?
Yes, what happened?
Cool. Khadija, I saw an image there. Do you want to share?
Sure. This is what I have. So, it's a people, but like the circle is like connected. So it's like, and then also both like through the head. So it's like we're all sharing our thoughts and stuff. But yeah.
Thank you. O'Brien, do you have one?
Yeah, I have a very rough draft that I have here. Hold on. Let's see. So can y'all see that? It's like with different circles, but really what I was trying to do is like name how the circles interact with each other. So like in the center is like internal comms specifically, and how like they have the communication for every other circle, and that goes to everybody else, and then how outreach outreaches to other people and brings people into these circles.
Thank you. Sneha, are you there? Also, if I'm mispronouncing your name, please
Yeah.
tell me.
No, it's Neha. You're pronouncing it right. Can I screen share?
Yes, please.
Let me quickly update the.
It's disabled.
Okay, I enabled it. Are you able to
Thank
do
you.
it now?
Yeah. Okay, can you see it?
Yes.
So I didn't get the time to write in those boxes, but basically like over here, the organization I'm part of, they have divided their co-founders like in two aspects. So one is for like technological field and stuff, and one is for like branding, advertising, and everything related to like brand promotion. marketing, everything. So like in technological, they have further divided into 2 executive directors, where they have like one who's managing stuff related to social media and stuff, and the second one who's managing like website and everything like that. And in branding advertising part, we have further 2 like divisions. One is for like everything related to writing and stuff like that, and the second one is related to creating market advertisements to attract people, if that makes sense. So yeah, and but one of the cons of this whole structure is that if these are the groups in the large boxes, okay, so like if we have to talk to founder, then we have to actually go through the director first, and then we can go and talk to the founder. We can't directly contact them. So I think that's a huge drawback over here, because we don't have meetings with them. We just have meetings with the directors. So yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. We only have time for one more, so I'm gonna leave it up to you. Who feels inspired to share their drawing? Far, please do.
Okay. Okay. See, I wanted to write the circles, but I didn't. So I'm just gonna screen share here. I have not screen. Okay. Okay. So you see, I have a lot of circles going on, and I may have forgotten some circles of the different teams, but these are like, governance, external comms, internal comms, all those different circles are, those are those circles. This is like the coordination circle, mission circle. Right now, there's like a line blurred between those two, but that's what that blue circle would be. And this would just be like the board chair and like executive directors. But here's the interesting thing about this is that there is so much ongoing communication happening through these circles to this circle and to this circle. Like there's always communication happening, relationships being built all throughout. And I think that's like one of the key things about my structure, just the ongoing communication. And it's not really limited who you can talk to, where the information is going. It's literally just everywhere, especially with our communication platform Slack. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm mindful of time, but also if someone's really excited about their drawing, I don't want to repress that. So if anyone's really excited about their drawing, please share it now. Deborah, you look excited? You're
Yeah, I
excited.
am excited. So, how do I see it? How do I do it so that I can see myself? Because
The-
otherwise I can't.
Probably
Okay.
impossible.
Got it. Pin the video. All right. So in the center, I have, right, I don't know if it's split, but the mission circle, business circle, etc. I put internal comms and leadership development inside because they're like babies. There are people paying attention to it, but it's not a full circle that meets. But then I have this question mark about where do all these projects live? Like advocacy did the People's Plan and the Mayoral Forum, but that was in partnership with a lot of others. So question mark. Anyway, I think that's the support structure of YPC, but I think partners have to do with YPC too. And so I'm not quite sure how that connection works, but I wanted them sort of in the next outer circle.
Thank you for sharing, and thank you for being honest about you being excited drawing. I definitely, if you're having excitement and you want to share it, please, I don't want to repress that. If you're like me and you're, okay, not sharing it, I would not say that I feel proud about it, so I'm okay not sharing, just keeping on. Switch gears to a little bit more presentation, not too long. I hope I'll do like a little bit, 15 minutes of talking. Julisa, would you share the slideshow, please? I'm thinking slide 6. And so basically, from what I've heard you all say, is you all have a very clear notion of what a circle is. So I won't ask that question. But I will do a playful thing where I like to describe a circle as similar to a cell. And that is, Julisa, would you click next? That they have three definitory elements. One is the aim, which I may consider equivalent to the nucleus in a cell. It is the center of the circle. It is that which brings the circle together to be. It is the reason why we meet, why we gather. The other one is members, a membrane. We need to have a limit. Who is and is not a part of the circle? If in sociocracy we operate with consent, and that in consent means no one objects, we need to know who is no one, or rather who is the everyone that we need consent from. Otherwise it's ambiguous and it lends itself to conflict. And lastly, it has a domain, which I like to consider similar to in, Julisa, would you click next? Similar to in a cell, the cytoplasm, which is the liquidy stuff where all those nice things inside of it that aren't the nucleus are floating in. And a domain is the area that a circle has authority to decide over. We'll talk more in detail about domains towards the end today. Would you go to the next slide, Julisa, please? So imagine an organization starts just with one circle, right? Or just with one cell. We'll pretend that it's the general circle because it's the only circle, right? It holds everything. How does it grow from there? You know? How does it move? How does it change things when, you know, you have too many members, like we said in the drawing earlier, too many members to hold around? What if the activities have grown too much that, you know, not all agenda topics are getting taken care of in the meetings? Where would you guess? How would you guess that it grows? What is a good next step? Anyone? Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, cells reproduce. Sorry, I guess I'll use a naturalistic metaphor. Cells reproduce. So the cell would have to reproduce. There would have to be more than one. What I'm not sure is the structure of the cell. So like another cell should have a membrane, a nucleus, but it's not the same information, right? Like the cell might have another purpose. So, yeah.
Cool. Can we see the next slide? It is exactly what I'm getting at, but we're falling way more into biology than I paid attention when I was in school. But it's basically that, creating another circle, you know, if the cell had too big of a name to realize it, oh, not that much is it. If the cell had too big of a name, that it was taking care of too much stuff, that it wasn't all fitting in one agenda, then that aim needs to get just subdivided into sub-aims and be simpler, and be turned into a subcircle, you know, and have its own membrane, have its own members, and of course some members overlap. And also to divide the domain into a subdomain and to grow it from there. And that's just the basic premise of, you know, every circle at any point in time is in its full freedom to create a subcircle, to delegate, that is to push out a decisioning, you know, like this is making it to our agenda, we're not getting around to this, would you please take care of it? Would you go to the next one, please, Julisa? And that is a very basic, or not basic, yeah, basic concept of sociocratic circle structures, and it is the word fractality, which I don't know if you're familiar with, but some also refer to it as self-similarity. But that is, you know, subcircles can create subcircles, which can create subcircles, which can create circles, and so on and so on and so on and so on until infinity. And the same thing up and down, you know, subcircles can have parent circles, which also have parent circles, which also have parent circles, and so on infinitely. So the idea is that they can create subcircles infinitely, according to need, obviously, not just for the sake of creating subcircles, according to need. as much as possible. And the idea is, if we remember earlier, the problem of centralization was not getting around to it enough, being spread too thin with too many agenda topics in one circle. Let's try and delegate as much as we can to the outside. Next one, please. And so because in the visuals, we represent a circle as slightly bigger than the other one, you might say, oh, does one circle have decision-making power over another one? In sociocracy, we speak about circular hierarchy. And it's not that one circle decides over the other, it's not, I know that it's problematic when we call the parent circle a parent circles, because that reminds us of our relationship to our parents, and that's not necessarily useful. But what it means is that, the broader circle, the higher up one, the more central one that created the subcircle, the smaller one, the more specific one, it's a matter of abstraction. You zoom in, you go more specific. You zoom out, you get less specific. You get more abstract. The general circle in the middle of everything, that in Michael's drawing, for example, was the coordination. Yeah, ideally, they don't have to make any decisions. Ideally, information just flows through, and as much as the decision making as possible happens as much on the outside as possible, and happens on the peripheries, because we're wanting to delegate, because it's nice to delegate. It's nice to not have to take care of everything. It's nice to say, hey, please, would you have the authority on this? Would you take care of this? Would you make this decisions on this? Next one, please. Of course, with distributed authority, saying, hey, would you please take care of this area of operations, also comes distributed responsibility. It is, would you take care of these decisions on behalf of the organization as a whole? So yes, with the autonomy to make decisions without having to ask for permission, also comes the responsibility of considering the interests of the broader self, of the whole organization, of the most impacted groups. And that's where the double link comes from. Next one. How are we? Let me look at the rest of the agenda. Does anybody have burning questions this far? Has anything not been clear? Or has anything been just confusing?
When roles are distributed in order to share leadership, decision-making, autonomy, is the role not just about getting it done, but then the role also is about communication? Because I'm just coming back to something Far said, and I feel like that's what we're seeing in the governance piece, that usual governance would have much less communication. It'd be like need to know, but we've been kind of figuring out how much do you need to know? What do you need to know? The frequency of it, in order to protect the bandwidth of all the people in the circles. Sorry, I hope that wasn't confusing, but.
Not at all. I think they're great questions. But I will say, hang on to them, because I have specific responses to them in different parts of the workshop, both to the role one and to the flow of information one. And I'm getting kind of sore. I've sat for a long time. So let's take 5 minutes, come right back. I promise to take it easy on everyone's attention span, including my own. So I'm going to stretch for 5 minutes. See you here at 55. All right. What up? Hey, comrades, are we back? I see thumbs up. I see some cameras. I'm very tempted to ask, if someone's not here, but I realized that is futile. Alrighty, let's start. Julisa, would you share again? Cool. So we want to decentralize, to delegate authority and decision making as much as possible, but we also want to keep circles connected. Next slide, please. And as some of you already mentioned, as O'Brien mentioned in the playing around with the faces piece, the way to do that is linking through members. At least the sociocratic way to do that is linking through members. Two members who participate fully in both circles and have consent rights in both circles. Would you go to the next one, please, Julisa? One of them acts as lead, the other one as representative or delegate. What do you all call it? Representative, delegate?
We don't have them yet.
Cool, awesome. That's great to know. The lead goes top down, or rather from broader to more specific, and the representative goes bottom up, or rather from more specific to broader context. And again, the one is broader focus, more specific focus. Would you go to the next one, please, Julisa? Circle roles are part of circle structures as well. If you have a better grasp of biology than I do, please let's check in after this to develop further the biology metaphor and find these a way to fit into that too. The lead and representative, as we had already established, one brings the broader context into the circle. The other brings the circle into the broader context. And the note taker and the facilitator are part of that too. They're part of maintaining the circle structure, maybe in slightly less obvious ways. The note taker stewards the information of the circle, as you know, and the facilitator stewards meeting time or agenda items and members' voices throughout the meeting. And the idea is that these roles they play key functions in maintaining the circle structure. For example, in note-taking the agendas, it's really nice that the circle include the circle's aim, who the members are, what is the way to contact them, which is its parent circle, does it have any subcircles, who are the double links for the parents and the subcircles. And that way, the key information about the structure itself is built into the systems themselves, and they don't necessarily have to live in people's memory or in people's minds. That's a key part of transparent and also effective ways that, if I want to contact all the members of a circle, or if I want to know who the leader of a circle is, I just know where to find the minutes. There was another point that I want to make here. I'm going to check my notes so I don't forget. For example, in Google Drive, the folder structure can ideally follow the same structure as the circle structure, with every circle having its own folder and then the subfolders, and that sort of maintaining one way so that it reflects the information of the system itself and not so much the individuals participating in it. Another one that I have is not just the Google Drive, but communications in general, internal communications in general can, and I think would benefit from following the organizational structure. For example, if there's a group email, an email to contact the whole circle, and the whole circle sees it, but you can by default have the agreement that, and responding to that email is part of the role description of the lead, it is assumed to be so. Or you can make it also part of the representative's role description. It doesn't really matter either way, as long as you have clarity of it, and as long as that knowledge is built into the systems. In general, communication systems following the organizational structure, so basically going by circle, I'd recommend for all communications, including Slack, Google Groups, etc. And then another thing that I think is cool, it's not necessarily a part of circle structure, but if we think of something as simple as an agenda handover between these 4 roles, each and every one of them has a point in which they touch them, and a point in which they hand it over to each other as information. So the lead is thinking in terms of the broader context to the more specific circle, but also thinking in terms of foresight, right? Like, what do we need to be thinking about next meeting? What do we need to be thinking about 2 months ahead? So sort of this perspective of guiding the circle in the future or as it goes in time. Then the facilitator takes that same agenda that was made thinking of the future and owns it in the present moment of the meeting when we're seeing each other's faces and hearing each other's voice in the meeting. And then the note taker also during the meeting takes the notes so that there's a memory of what happened in what decisions were made, what happened in the circle, and that in the future, with hindsight, the representative can make a more accurate report to the next circle. And that's, just one simple way of what I mean by the information being baked into the systems and not necessarily being held by individuals. And let me check my notes one last time. That's enough. Next one, please, Julisa. This next slide is exactly what I was thinking about with your question, Michael, of roles, specifically double links, where very much they're the ones that handle flow of information between circles, whether it's from broader to more focused or vice versa. And I think with like the commitment to transparency comes also the responsibility of filtering and amplifying, and being selective and intentional with what we choose to filter. How do I get only the important parts into the summary of the meeting? How do I get only the bits that are relevant to this circle? How do I make them part of the report? And also the opposite, sometimes you have to amplify some parts. It's not just filtering, it's not just making some parts less. Sometimes you have to amplify the meeting, like, hey, in the last mission circle meeting, we decided this, and it's really important to you this specific circle for the following reasons. And so I think there's also, with transparency, every member in Sociocracy carries a responsibility with what they share, with whom and how, which of course in non-transparent organizations, that's exactly how manipulation works. But in our case, it's, the information is so much, and because every member has access to it, we want to avoid information overload. And so we want to help each other of like, where do I find only the stuff that I need to find? Next one, please. Just playing around with the idea of organizations as living systems, also connected to the idea of a cell. If we see organizations as living systems, then flow of information is the nervous system. Information being a very, very abstract. It's not just the things we say, but it's in organizations, the phrase knowledge is power or information is power becomes very literal with something as simple as, if I don't know where the agenda document is, how can I add my topics to the agenda? We know that as a member, I have the freedom to add topics to the agenda, but if I don't know where it is, where I can find it in the Google Drives or whatever, then how can I add it? And Ellie, I see you're joining. How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. How are you? Sorry I'm late.
That's okay. You do not have to apologize. Actually, Deborah told me in advance. And we're halfway through, and we mostly played around in the first half. We moved some things around in the slideshow. We shared some drawings, and I was just sharing a few basics of circles, like what is a circle and circle structures. Right now, we're talking about information flow. Let me put the link to the presentation in case you want to follow along, or in case you want to catch up on the older, not the older, but the stuff we covered at the beginning.
Thanks.
Yep. Also, Carline, I saw you joined, but since you said in the chat you'd be listening in, I assumed you didn't want to say hi. But if you want to say hi and tell us how you're doing, please do. Alrighty. Julisa, would you go to the next slide, please? I don't think we need a break per se, but let's take a deep breath. Cool. Next slide, please, Julissa. So, with the principles that we mentioned earlier of roles, double links, and circles that can create subcircles and so on until infinity, this is what a very basic circle structure looks like in a sociocratic organization. Has a general circle in the middle, has a mission circle there. Sometimes we put it on top, but that doesn't matter. It can be sideways, it could be down. And it has department circles, which are the subcircles of general circle. Assuming department circles are the ones that, you know, hold the sub aims. So the mission circle holds the mission of the organization, mission and vision. The general circle holds the general aim, and the department circle holds the sub aims. And as Michael said earlier, ideally, general circle doesn't hold any decision making, or rather, it holds any decision making that it can't distribute to department circles. You know, if things aren't being, if department circles aren't getting around to something, or they say, hey, we actually need a broader perspective on this topic, we could benefit from a wider scope, then let's bring it up to the general circle. But ideally, we want to delegate out as much as we want to. And I know that YPC currently has a mission circle, but currently no distinction between general circle and mission circle. We don't have to fully talk in detail about it now, but I would recommend that that change soon, and I think YPC is ready and could benefit from it. And I also know that the board is an important, a special piece of how mission circle currently looks like, and we would have to look at that eventually. Next slide, please. That's just as a reiteration of the same bit as earlier, just abstracting it. Mission circle holds the mission, general circle holds the general aims, department circle sub aims, and of course circles sub aims. And next one, thank you. That's how it looks when it's more fleshed out, and when it has more subcircles. You might have a question of how many, one circle can have more than one subcircle, as in it can have several subcircles. You might ask yourself, how many is a good number of subcircles? How many is too many? I think 3 is ideal, 4 maybe, 5 is already pushing it, because, you know, every subcircle is linked with a double link. So in a general circle, having those 4 subcircles it has right now, which one of them is a mission circle, that means that's 8 people. And I would draw the limit there. I think 10 people is already a meeting where it's tough to hold around and still remain focused. Would you go to the next slide, please, Julissa? And then there's some special cases. in addition to the general circle, the department circle, and the mission circle. One of them is helping circles, and the other one's operational roles. And I hope I'll get to your question on operational roles, Michael. Would you go to the next slide, please, Julisa? Helping circles basically are temporary subcircles. They're created by a circle with a way clearer, way narrower mandate, which is the term and expected outcome. So a classical example of a helping circle, if a circle is having trouble working on a proposal, they'll say, let's create a helping circle just to draft the proposal. But the proposal will still have to be consented by the circle. And the helping circle can be a smaller group to work on something more concrete. Maybe it can be the people who feel most affected by the proposal. Maybe it can be those who feel, clarity. Maybe it can be those who feel inspiration on how to draft it or how to write it. Someone that we really trust their criteria, someone who's really good at writing. It can be any number of reasons. But the slight distinction between the helping circle and subcircle is that the helping circle is way narrower and temporary. Can you think of an example for this? Maybe we can entertain the possibility. I kind of have one, and it's actually in YPC, the governance circle that is putting together this training is pretty much a governance circle in that it has a clear term, which is July, and it has a super specific aim, it's like revise for governance structure, and it doesn't have the final decision. It doesn't say change your governance structure for it. It's just take a look at it and tell us if there's anything that we need to consider and that we need to revise. And the final decision will live in the mission circle that created the helping circle. That's one example. Next slide, please, Julisa. The other example, a special case that I call, is operational roles, which, as you see in that drawing, sometimes gets represented as a dotted line, a dotted circle inside of a circle. Of course, any organization can come up with its own way of visually representing a stuff, as long as it's clear to everyone who sees it. Next slide, please, Julisa. In operational roles, one way to describe them is they're a circle of one. Circle of one sounds kind of silly because, a circle is, the whole point is sitting in a circle. So how can you sit in a circle on your own? But it's a circle of one if we take the cell definition, in that it has an aim, operation it carries out, and a domain. That domain is defined by the circle, and it can be, give it a lot of freedom. Like, you're going to carry out the operations. You just decide, give them a lot of authority or a lot of power to decide over operations. Or it can be quite narrow, and it can say, the way that we want you to carry this work out for the circle, but we want you to do it so and so and so and so and so. And maybe the circle can create, guidelines and workflows and patterns and instructions and how to do it. In case it's not super clear, operations, there's decisions that you would make in the doing and that you can only make in the doing. Like when you're making bread, sometimes the exact correlation of wheat to water is something that you have to play by ear in the doing. And I think it's nice to delegate that decision making of if you're on the field carrying out the operations, just go ahead and play it by ear. Make the decisions on your own. But the decision to use whole wheat, maybe the organization has very clear that they only use whole wheat or that they only use gluten-free. And that's where they would make a policy that clearly, defines, describes, puts limits on the domain of that operational role. and how they carry out operations and what they can or cannot decide just on their own as an individual. Next slide, please. We usually try to create operational roles when there's a bundle of operations. So maybe there's not really a need to do it for just a one-off type thing, but if you know that it's something recurring, then it makes sense. The circle has authority to decide how the role carries out operations, as I already said, defining what does the person holding the role have or not authority over. And this is the part that I think maybe has a piece to the answer to your question, Michael, which is distinguishing clearly between feedback and the authority to make decisions. When the role is created, it's important to establish the limits of, like, you know what, the circle ultimately has the decision on this choice, or saying, you know what, let's delegate authority to the role and empower them to do it, but let's ask them to do a report every meeting. You know, tell us how the work actually went throughout this week, and maybe in the reports there can be a section for the whole circle to make suggestions. You know, and that's how I've usually managed. The same idea of information being baked into the systems, and how, you know, every circle agenda holding as a standard item reports from its parent circles and subcircles, maybe also holding reports from people who are performing operational roles, and having that space for feedback of, like, hey, I really like how you did this. And also, of course, the thing is, like, ooh, how do we, you know, decide someone's goofing up, or when they're not carrying out the decisions totally in service of the circle? But it also generates the opposite, you know, it generates a space to steadily recognize, hey, thank you for doing that for the circle. We really appreciate it. Thank you. It looks really good. It looks solid. And then I shared a checklist for operational roles there that Deborah shared with me, and that I'm going to check time to see if we have a chance to revise it or not. We do have a little bit of time. Let me just see if I took it out of the slideshow or not. Julisa, would you go to the next slide, see if it worked? No, it didn't work. Can you stop presenting mode and then go back one slide to look at the checklist? Yeah, there. Or you don't have to check the slide. You can just see the next slide instead of look at the document itself. It's just because I had deactivated the slide, and there it is. And as you see, the checklist I took from YPC's documents, and I think it's super thorough. That's why I just copy pasted it. Says name of the role, the circle it belongs to, the purpose, the aims, the domains, related circles, qualifications, hours, and term review / date. Two things. One, this is also a really good example of, you know, the information lives in the systems itself. It's held in the role, and it is written down in the documentation in the role description, instead of just, you know, going by memory or it just being on the agenda minutes and so on. But also, it's not that different from the description of a circle. You know, it needs to have a name, it needs to have a parent circle, the circle it belongs to, it needs to have a name, it needs to have a domain, etc. Do you have something like an operational role within YPC, either already established or that you think could be developed soon-ish?
I mean, maybe because I'm doing it, treasurer. I don't know, maybe treasurer is an operational role that we have, given the structure and where we're at in our organizational development.
The role of treasurer, you say, which is held within Mission Circle, correct?
Yes.
that one's kind of tough here, right? Because it's also part of the board, and the board requires it, like, comes with some specifications on its own. Like, you don't have full, as an organization, you don't have full decision of it. You kind of have to have one.
Yeah, in short, I think it's in the mission circle because it's in the industrial complex. It's an officer kind of thing, but it's also like treasurer, bookkeeper. Like, it's a little bit of, it's not just treasurer, it's operational. It's like finance. So like the treasurer role would split finance with the code, I don't know, whoever, but it's pretty operational right now because we need it to be, you know?
Awesome. I'm only seeing now, Deborah, that you shared in the chat, external comms platforms manager. My computer's kind of slow, so I'm really scared to click on the link and then not be able to, you know, mute myself or unmute myself. But do you want to share a little bit about it?
Yeah, we just recognized with external comms, and Carline and Khadija could say more, but now that there's MailChimp and Facebook and LinkedIn and YouTube and Linktree and Canva, there's just a lot of tech platforms out there that are related specifically to the work that external comms is doing with social media and newsletters and things like that. So we needed one person to really know things like how to get people onto those systems, what are the passwords, if we change anything in one system, how does it react with everyone else? So that's a specific role that the external comms team created, and it's held by Samantha.
Awesome. Yeah, that's always the example that I try to use when explaining an operational role, and also when talking about domains, which we'll do in a minute. And that is social media or anything involving accounts, you know, where you have to appoint an individual basically to just do the tasks, but you actually make some important decisions as you're doing it. Like, it's kind of big when you're actually posting on social media on behalf of the organization. You're putting out the face of the organization and how it presents itself, and so it's important for the circle that holds the operational role to clarify, you know, on what things does the person have, how much freedom do we give them to act, or how much information and input do we want to give them of, like, you know, move it in this direction. Would you go to the next slide, please, Julisa? Lastly, before I stop talking and we all talk more amongst each other, I want to talk about domains, which was the cytoplasm in the cell, which I hope I'm pronouncing right. And it is a key idea of sociocracy, and key for every member to understand well in order for it to work. And it is the area of authority that a circle is trusted with. When we're thinking, you know, that the general circle creates subcircles, or any circle creates subcircles to delegate authority, it hands things over and says, hey, do this for the organization. Please hold it carefully. Please hold it with care. A way to think about it is, what can a specific circle make decisions about that other ones can't? And as I said earlier, with distributed authority comes shared responsibility, and specifically the responsibility to ask for feedback from the broader contexts, from the whole organization, from different circles, specifically from the broader circles, the parent circles, and also by the groups most impacted, of course, not just everyone for the sake of everyone and shouting out, but recognizing who are the groups most affected and who can give us the key feedback to make to inform the best decision that we can make, or a good enough decision that we can make in the service of the organization. And again, it's really, really important in this to distinguish between decision making and feedback / input. Decision making meaning, you know, a very harsh consent, you know, as harsh as the binary yes I consent or no I object, to the feedback of saying, like, hey, maybe you want to consider it in making your Facebook post this other color. Next slide, please. The idea of, I have this this pie chart. The parts of the domain that don't get clearly delegated out stay in the in the parent circle. So like we identified, ideally, we spread out the authority and on the different domains, on subdomain C, B, and A as much as possible. But if something doesn't get pushed out, then it is always held by the central or the original circle. And that is why the general circle holds the general aim and basically takes care of decisions that aren't being taken care in any other space. You know, by default, it all percolates up to the middle, so to speak. Next slide, please. The important part about domains and defining them clearly is identifying if there's possible overlaps or gaps. What do I mean by overlap? Two circles taking care of the same thing. What I mean by gap is circles are so separated that something's falling through the cracks. There's something that needs to be tended to that isn't being gotten around to by any circle. If you think back to the activity at the very beginning where we moved around the faces and we moved in a circle and in different configurations, if we're actually doing it with our bodies in a room and you picture us dancing, we want to be far enough that anyone can still move freely. You know, imagine we want to keep that same shape and move in the same directions while holding the same shape. In order to do that, we need to be somewhat synchronized. And we want to be close enough where we can still read each other's pace and pulse, not far enough that we can no longer hear us. But if you're too close to each other, we're stepping on each other's toes. So the overlap, it says there, the telltale sign or the usual symptom is when somebody's stepping on each other's toes and they say, why did they think they could change our blah, 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 blah. Or who said they can do that? Depending on the organizational context, we'll tend to phrase things differently. And then the gap is like, why doesn't anyone ever blank? You know, is it that nobody cares? Why doesn't anyone ever blank? And then the telltale sign is we hand things to each other. I don't know if anyone here is like really keen on sports, but the idea of like when you make a pass, you're always making eye contact. Like, here you go. I'm handing it over. Like, yes, go ahead and have it, but I'm not just tossing it at you. I'm feeling your hand grab it as we let go. It's like, hold it with, here you go, but hold it with care. And then you hand things over smoothly. Next one, please. That's it. That's the presentation. And now I actually would like us to talk. If you have any questions, of course, please do. No, Julisa, not all of it, not all of it, just the YPC slide. Like 2 slides back. If you have any questions, if something wasn't clear, please let me know. If you have reactions or curiosities, please do. Let's do a round. Shino, then Deborah.
So we're doing reactions, right?
Yes, unless you have questions. If you have questions, please go ahead. But if you want,
I have sort of a philosophical question, I guess. I love the concept and the structure, and I love that with decision making there is responsibility. What I struggle with accountability, right? What happens when decisions made in whichever circle are not beneficial to the big circle as a whole? Yeah, I think that's my biggest question.
Deborah, and then sorry, I heard you say at the end that it was a question, but then I realized I wasn't paying close enough attention to make an attempt and answer the question. So would you restate the question? I'm so sorry.
That's quite all right. Accountability. When a circle makes a decision that is not in line with the mission or the greater good of the collective, you know, what do we do?
Got it. Yeah, I actually don't have a short answer, so I'm going to sit with it and I will actually try to think about it. So, Deborah and then Far.
I pass for now.
Awesome. Far.
I really love that there was like different diagrams and visuals. Visuals really helped me like understand and learn. So I think that was like what really made this so much easier to understand.
Cool. I will say I'm seeing my computer get kind of slow because it's been on Zoom all day. So if at one point I can't unmute myself or something like that, just the remainder of the agenda is this, the questions that you see on the slideshow, and just self-manage the rounds if I don't make it to the end. But, well, Brian, do you have questions or do you want to share your reactions to what we've seen so far?
I have no questions, but would say that everything has been really informative. And this has been work that like we've already been doing and processing and like putting out there. So it's not something that's like completely foreign. It's more of just like identifying and like putting names to like the work that we've been doing. So it's really dope, really cool.
Sneha?
As of now, I don't have any questions, but I have to say that this is, as I said before, this is the first time I actually enjoyed biology.
Nice. Julisa?
I'm processing. I pass for now.
Michael?
Not a question, but one of the things this made me think about is like policy stuff like that. Like institutional policy, we're not institution, we have a group policy, group stuff like that. Yeah.
Hey, Carline, if you're willing and able. Oh, by far, I just saw that. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, I joined late and I could really only listen in. But from what I gathered, from what I've heard, I've learned a lot, and I like how it really relates back to YPC and how we're already starting to kind of implement some of the things into our organization. And it's some of the stuff that I've heard in like the governance too, so it sounds kind of familiar. And I like the idea of like the breathing break. I think it was a nice kind of regrouping. That's probably the wrong word, but it was a nice little break to like recenter ourselves. So great job.
Ellie, any questions or reactions to the content shared so far?
I just really want to echo what Connor said about the visuals. I especially really like the visuals with domains, and I thought they were really cool about like how there were the different circles with different spaces amount between them. So I thought that was cool.
Thank you. Annette?
I agree. I feel like the information is put in a way that like it was easy to process, and it was like digestible. So I really appreciated that. Learned a lot. I think Gina also brought up a really important note on like what does accountability look like, because these are the structures, right? But then it's like people who operate in the framework, and like with people, like you can't always like really expect anything for sure. And sometimes there's harm, and sometimes it's like life happens, so what does accountability look like in that perspective?
Thank you. Khadija? Questions, reactions, anything you want to share, anything that comes up?
I feel like everybody touched on what I wanted to ask.
Sorry, Eric, can you mute? Because I think it might.
Yeah, I don't think.
Cool. Sorry for the feedback. It's just sometimes the mute button kind of goes away, or all buttons go away, because I think I've pushed old Bessie, my computer, too much today. I think that was all this. One, I was just thinking one piece of an answer that may not be satisfactory at all to the question on accountability, Shino. I thought, what if we phrased it in a different way? Like, what if we do poorly as a team, and being scared, like, oh, what if we drop the ball in an important moment? And it's like, well, then I guess it's just tough in a way, like we dropped the ball. I'm thinking more of the part of the organization where there's a sense of a whole, right? What if a circle dropped the ball? That means the organization dropped the ball, not I'd be hesitant to think about it in terms of like, how does a circle hold another one accountable when they're really both part of the same team, part of the same whole, part of the same living organism, and we're all in the interest of circles performing well as a whole, or the structure performing well as a whole, rather than each circle separately. That's just part of an answer. The next bit that I wanted to do was taking some time to answer the question that was there on the slideshow, which I can copy here on the chat so that we don't need to refer to the slideshow and see it, and we can see each other's faces. And it is based on all this that we shared today. What are some changes that you think need to be made to YPC's circle structure to reflect its reality better and to meet its needs, its organizational needs better? If someone feels inspired or has an answer, please unmute yourself and then just pass the round. That way I can stay muted for longer. Someone? Adjustments you'd like to make to YPC?
I think the helping and operational circle distinctions was pretty important for me today, at least. I don't know if it's so much of a governance, thing as more of like as opposed to an organizational design thing, but I feel like that's our growth. I think I think they're kind of blended in circles a little bit. Yeah, I think they're blended in circles a little bit. And I just think there's some growth because in cooperative frameworks, people do a little, it's distributed, right? So people do a little bit of everything and we cooperate, and it's not like there's a staff and there's an advisory and there's a this, like we're blowing up those foolish models. But yeah, to get things done, there's still a little bit of a need for a help circle, operational circle. Like they make sense for the sake of somebody has to make the flyers, somebody has to put the thing in Excel, someone, and I think it helps members have some sort of distinctions that allow us to then move better. And I think as our membership grows, that kind of thing will be important. And unfortunately, my family's demanding me, y'all, so I have to run. The second time she comes must mean it's time to go. Thank you for this. I'm grateful and my cup is full. I will see everyone, I think, on Slack, I guess. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you so much for coming. Anyone else want to share ideas that come to mind on adjustments that could be made to your circle structure based on this?
I definitely think our mission circle and general circle need to split. I think we're at a phase with Youth Power Coalition where with our new members, we need to sort of not create subcircles, but more fill out the circles we already have. And the other reflection I have is I think we need more operational roles. Yeah, there's some elements of work like who is going to talk with all the partners, or what does it mean to be a recruiter? Make sense? Oh, and then finally, Sheena, before you go, one piece about accountability. I think the reason accountability is so difficult in the city is we need agreement on aims, goals, and like this collective well-being. So
yeah, I also think it requires a mentality and attitude shift, right? Because we are so quick to point fingers to blame other people for our failures, but we all have to get on board with this. If your little part fails, then it's actually the entire organization that's failing, which means it's everybody's responsibility. And I think that's a new way of looking at accountability, not from a punitive place, but more like a collective responsibility sharing, a collective accountability, which is amazing stuff. So thank you so much. And I'm sorry I have to go. This was really, really useful. Thank you. I learned a lot.
Thank you so much. Goodbye, comrade. Deborah, I heard you say splitting mission circle and general circle. Yes, I wrote that one down. I heard you say more operational roles, which I think maybe Michael was also hinting at, when he said someone needs to get it done, someone needs to make the flyer, etc. And did you see a third one? But filling the circles that you already have instead of creating new ones. Are you thinking of with members, like populating them with more members?
yes.
Cool. Anyone else want to share? I'm just writing some of this stuff down for my own memory's sake. Oh, I have one that I'll add. Having double links, not just the lead, but also the representative, selecting those. What else? I'm gonna look through the slides to see if there's any bit like, this could be explored further, and I invite you to do the same if you want to.
Ali asked what are double links.
Cool. Double links are two members of two circles that connect the two circles by participating in both of those circles as full members with consent rights. And usually one member represents one circle and for the other circle, and the other one the other way around. And I can just show a visual here real quick. If you go to slide 14, let's hope my computer doesn't bail on me. If you go to slide 14, that's two circles, and you see both members. They're on the edges. They're both full members of the circle. And what I was just mentioning is those are the leads of each circle, which YPC has. But then there's usually a complementary role, who's the representative or delegate or whatever you want to call it, that goes the other way around. The lead coming from the broader circle into the more specific circle, and the delegate going the other way around from the more specific to the broader. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
Cool. Let me go through the quick. I will add also to the list clarifying domains of each circle, because you already have them, but there could be written ones. We talked briefly about this the other day in Governance Circle, and Deborah gave an example from a blog post in SOFA's blog that explains domains and domain distribution. And the example was like, imagine you throw everything out on the table, everything that some part of the organization needs to do. Imagine you toss it all on the table, and that table would be general circle. And then from that table, you pick and choose what needs to go out and what needs to be put in the same boxes together, lumped together into circles and subcircles. And then whatever doesn't find a neat place in a box in a subcircle, just by default stays in the general circle. I will also ask another question, maybe more specific, maybe more complex, but how you want to represent the coalition model. I know Deborah made some reference to it in her drawing by putting it the partners on the outside, but I'd be curious if any of y'all have ideas on it. How to include partners in the organization structure, or not partners, but growing broader than just the members in the working circles currently. Anyone? Deborah, thoughts?
Oh, my thoughts are, well, I actually, there's something called network weaving, and someone said there are 4 different networks. There's the support network, which I see as the YPC teams that I was talking about. There's the intentional network, which to me, are like people who come together very intentionally to be in community with one another and get things done. And I think that those will be our mission and movement partners. But there's also the relationship network, which is just like all the different people that we know. They're our neighbors, our family, our friends, and they're just as important to a network. And from a coalition, from a governance perspective, maybe they're not making the decisions, but it's a good starting point to give support. And then there's finally this action network, which is like all the projects that are going on. So representing the coalition, there are two specific thoughts immediately. One is just saying that, yes, this part of YPC is a support network. When we're talking about the general circle, the business, governance, general circle, business, external comms, advocacy, etc. That if you're a partner, then you have decision-making rights. How do I put it? I just lost it. Oh, one thing that I was always really curious about is, y'all know how there's one of the challenges we have is there are so many youth-led groups out there that sometimes we don't know what every other one is doing. And then sometimes there's competition for resources, or sometimes there's like disagreement over who is doing what and reinventing the wheel. So I'm wondering, within Youth Power Coalition, at least, do partners agree, hey, we are going to know who everyone else is doing and what their domains and aims and missions are, so that we better know how to collaborate? Should I pass it?
I just leave it to if anybody has thoughts on not just this, but on anything on today's topic of organizational structures. Yes, Ellie, please.
Just going on Deborah's last point, I think it might be cool to like have a directory of like what youth organizations are working on. I don't know if that's something that YPC has capacity for, or another organization that we work with, but I think it would sort of help the problem that Deborah, you were referring.
Anyone else have anything they want to share or want us to talk about before we do a closing round? Okay. If not, then let's close. Please tell me how this was for you, if you have any feedback. This is the second out of 4 sessions, so I hope to get better at it every time. So if you have any feedback for me on the content, on the pacing, on anything, and how you're doing, what you're taking away from this session. Annette, you want to go first?
Yes, I think I'm still processing on like, yeah, just seeing how the frameworks are working in real life time. And I think that's like really interesting for me to think about, and how, yeah, so I'm taking that away from it.
And would you pass it?
Yes, I'll pass it to Ellie.
I think I've definitely taken a lot away from this, and particularly, like I said before, and Farsad, just around the graphics, and I'm interested to learn more. Oh, sorry, I'll pass it to Carline.
I'm taking away like just new information on governance and how we can apply it to YPC. And like Ellie said, I'm excited to learn more. And I'll pass it to O'Brien.
I think this is a lot of process, a lot of information, very helpful. It's a lot to digest. I feel like I found myself being a little overwhelmed sometimes, or not completely engaged. But my question was, is there going to be, are we gonna be share? Can we wait? Actually, never mind, because you shared the slide deck in the chat, right? Cool. So I just want to like have time to just process that and look through that myself. And I'll pass it to Julisa.
Did you pass it to me?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. You cut off a little bit for me. So what I'm taking definitely echo a lot of content, a lot of great content, and just reflecting from the first training, a lot of the things that were discussed like came up in like day-to-day work. So I'm excited to take this content context and kind of apply it throughout the following weeks. And I appreciate the graphics and the visuals on the slides because that really ties the picture together for me. I'll pass it to Deborah.
Much admiration for Eric because the conference went from like 9 to 4. And then to do another 2-hour training, we are very appreciative of that gift. I also felt like it was a lot of content. And so I'm wondering, where does the content live? Where does the practice live? So I don't know about that tension. Yeah, so just the one. Carline, I believe.
I already went.
Okay, my apologies.
Yeah, I'm the only one left. Yeah. So I definitely learned a lot and I'm still processing. I mean, like it was a really good opportunity. I appreciate it a lot. And I loved these slides. It was just amazing. I think everyone is done. Is anyone left?
I've not gone. How am I leaving? What am I taking away? At one point, I was very tired after the conference and thinking like, oof, am I going to make it to this? And I knew that I was going to make it, but I was more thinking like, how much am I really going to perform as my best trainer self for 2 hours after a long, long day of talks on Zoom? And I think the break did it for me. I really felt energy renewed after the 5-minute break. It did wonders for me. It actually even made me feel more sped up than I was before the break. I was left wondering. So I'm hearing, Deborah, the part of that's a lot of content. Maybe we can talk about where to fit in more practice. Definitely hearing that. Another part of me was sitting with how helpful the more playful and participatory parts felt, because I did try to take it in a different spin. I know last time the main feedback was, 2 hours on Zoom talking is a while, so I tried to incorporate other things that weren't talking to try to make it easier. And other than that, just grateful. Yeah, it's just fun to do this with you. You're a really fun group. I like that some people came here that didn't come last time. And it's just a gift to get to know you and to do these. And I'm really excited for the coming ones. And I'm really excited to get better at them every time. Check. And my computer's bailing on me.
It's many thanks, Eric.